Once upon a time, there was a regular schmegular girl who embarked on a journey for peace. Along came a wise man who presented a new hobby and offered an alternative career opportunity. She didn't know at the time that accepting the beautiful man's offer would send her down a path that would ultimately change the entire course of her life. You see, the beautiful man shined boldly in his passions unapologetically, and he encouraged her to do the same, to step out of her comfort zone with confidence and use her light to help others. It took a while for her to adjust, but she eventually became the student and the teacher, learning gems from others and passing down those gems to anyone else that needed. She made many friends that she'd party with, and they'd come together to celebrate their accomplishments. She really enjoyed spending time with the very people who would eventually end up leaving her out in the cold. You see, on the surface, it seemed to be one big happy family. Underneath it all, there was a lot of conflict, competition, animosity, and envy. Some directed at her and some directed at her beautiful man. They hadn't yet realized that some of the people around them were determined to keep them separated by any means necessary, so they each believed lies and rumors about the other. This drove a wedge between what could have been such a beautiful union. The girl spent some time dwelling on the lost love of the family and most of all of her beautiful man. See, in the beginning, she wanted to shine like him, but she realized at some point she actually wanted to shine with him. She had loved and had lost in the past, but the loss of his love hit her like a ton of bricks, and she couldn't understand why. She went down a different path and withdrew from everything: the hobby, the career, the family, and even social media. She withdrew from the world and spent more time reflecting on all that had happened. She had regrets about leaving, but every time she thought about going back, her intuition would remind her why she left in the first place. She was becoming quite grateful for the peace she had achieved since leaving and had no desire to walk back into the chaos. As she looked back on all the challenges and setbacks intended to stunt her growth, she developed a deep appreciation for herself. She realized how much strength it took to be able to take the high road instead of stooping to the levels of those around her. She realized she was powerful and courageous for continuing on her journey even when it meant walking alone. This was a major breakthrough that handed her two keys: self-esteem and confidence. They were the keys to self-love, something she'd never experienced before. With this, she would wipe her hands of every past version of herself. She was determined to do everything necessary to keep evolving. At a time where she should have been more alone than ever, her angels came in, offering love, protection, and divine guidance. They said she has the ability to change the direction of her life to one that is full of abundance. They said not to dwell on past mistakes and reassured her that she is worthy and deserving of a beautiful life. They told her they have been and will always be with her every step of the way, and to remember that she is always surrounded by love and support even when she feels lonely. They said she has many talents, many gifts that she hasn't been using to their fullest potential, and that everything she's been imagining for herself can be hers if she is willing to do the work necessary to get it. They encouraged her to start using all of her gifts for her benefit. She made the decision to learn more about spirituality. She began meditating daily, bought crystals, sage, and got a reading. The reading revealed that she is an empress, meant to be a healer and use her nurturing, compassionate, and empathetic ways to help others. The reader also stated that the girl is highly intuitive, but allows herself to believe that her mind is playing tricks on her because she doesn't understand how she just knows. The reader also said to stop doubting her intuition, as it is a gift she was blessed with to help her make the best decisions. Through angel numbers, the girl was encouraged to deepen her relationship with God. She started to pray more, to ask for the things she wants and needs, and to ask for transmutation of any fears, doubts, or worries. She would often ask for divine guidance or intervention when she was lost, and always express gratitude for the support. She started following a divine path focused on doing all things with love, virtue, and righteousness. She worked on her mindset and began trading negative, pessimistic thoughts for positive, optimistic ones. That helped change her perspective and keep a cool head during tough times. She began breaking bad habits, patterns, or cycles that weren't positively serving her. She soon got news that a lover was near. He was referred to as a twin flame. The girl wasn't interested in love. She was finally happy, surrounded by confidence, self-love, and peace. However, her angels were adamant that she open her heart to love and stated that this person would allow her to experience unconditional love. She got more messages that indicated she needed to forgive her twin for misunderstandings in the past and trust that those hiccups will never happen again. So this was not actually a new love, but a newness in love, a love reinvigorated. The girl was confused. She couldn't think of anyone from her past who would be offering her this type of love. So she did some research on twin flames. Her twin, the other half of her soul, is meant to trigger a spiritual awakening. Her mind instantly went back to the beautiful man. She had mixed feelings about this discovery. On one hand, she still harbored frustration and distrust from the way things ended, but on the other hand, she couldn't deny that she still adored him. He was perfection to her, everything she thought she'd never be able to find in one person. The knowledge that he is her twin allowed her to view him through a different lens and helped her understand some of the issues that had happened. She was soon overjoyed with the idea of coming into union with him, but only if they could mend the problems they had previously and move forward with trust and faith in the relationship restored. She was divinely guided to ask for forgiveness for her part in their separation. She saw this as a chance to express how she truly felt. She decided to let her guard down and allow herself to be vulnerable. She apologized for everything she did that may have put distance between them, and how she regretted moving away from him and hoped that they could work things out. She awaited his response. She was instantly rejected, left heartbroken, shook. She couldn't understand how this was possible. This was supposed to be a divine union. She just knew they were destined for a beautiful, passionate future together, surrounded in love. She saw everything in a man who never even considered a future with her. Although it felt good to apologize and brought her some closure, it still felt cruel, like her angels had set her up only to be smacked down. His rejection caused a lot of pain and conflict within her. So she retreated into her mind again and took some time to reflect and heal. She continued her spiritual practices to ease some of the inner turmoil about the situation. She knew she couldn't stay riddled with grief about him. She had to pick herself up and keep going in pursuit of her soul mission. She would push through to the end, with or without the beautiful man by her side. She would continue chasing her passions and expanding wherever she could. She knew she could create her own abundance, a life of financial freedom where she could pour freely into the cups of anyone who needed it. She moved quickly towards her goals and came up with several great ideas, one of which involved that alternative career at the beginning of the story, and that's where she encountered a problem. You see, the girl came up with a really innovative idea that had the potential to benefit anyone involved in this career. Upon launching the idea, she soon identified several moles coming in, attempting to stop her bag. They disguised themselves as friends to find out her plans, all while lying on her name to dissuade potential partners and clients from supporting the business, while attempting to convince the Empress that the idea was fruitless and wouldn't go anywhere. The Empress discovered that these attempts were orchestrated by a bitter, miserable tyrant, his troll-faced hag, and her lapdog. They had been cut off in the past as they were at the center of the drama and chaos at the beginning of her story. The tyrant was also the driving force behind the wedge between her and the beautiful man. Needless to say, she kept her distance. So because he couldn't get to her directly, the tyrant coerced and bribed anyone who had access to her to do his dirty work. Pathetic, really. But the solution was simple. She built a wall up around herself, a wall that would keep her guarded from even the one she loved the most. It was an emotionally laboring task, but it had to be done. Anyone attempting to cause a blockage got blocked, physically and virtually. She kept her heart, her location, and her next moves to herself. Her journey would stop for no one. She wouldn't stay with them, and they couldn't come with her. She also had to cut off her hopes for her twin. She had learned he was meant to be the emperor to her empress, a beautiful divine couple. He had helped her be able to launch her new idea, but in that time she spent with him, she realized the reason their union hasn't happened is because he hadn't yet gone through his spiritual awakening. So even though she saw him as her perfect match, she could no longer hold her breath waiting for him to step into his divinity. He would either surrender to the journey and meet her in the clouds, or she would have to leave it where it lies. The Empress' sole focus was on growing the seed she had been planting. She had her business, she had started her YouTube channel, and she had just begun posting on TikTok. She started to see how all these things could come together to make something beautiful. She had stepped so far out of her comfort zone and was doing all the things she had only ever imagined herself doing. She was excited to see where the future would take her. As soon as she started gaining momentum, she faced a huge setback. She was already trying to dig her way out of financial trouble, and she soon lost her home. She also began having serious problems with her car that she was in no position to be able to fix. This weighed heavily on her. The Empress takes pride in her independence and being able to stand on her own. These troubles, happening back to back, overwhelmed her. She felt like her sense of stability and security had just been rocked, and she wasn't sure what to do or where to turn to be able to get out of it. She knew the path she had been following would take her far, but how could she keep going when she was drowning in fear and anxiety about her current situation? Her angels reassured her the trouble she was facing was for her greatest good. Although she believed them, she wasn't really trying to hear that at the moment. She needed a solution, a way out of her turmoil. She needed a miracle. Her faith remained intact, but she began sinking back into her lower vibrations. She realized this was because she had stopped tending to her mind, her body, and her soul. Her angels had already warned her that neglecting even one of the three would leave her feeling lost and anxious. So she was still eating healthy and working out, but she had stopped meditating and was letting her negative, pessimistic thoughts pile up. When she cleared that up, she was able to weigh out her options and realize that she didn't have a feasible way out of her troubles. Everything she could think of wasn't panning out. She got scammed out of the money she was using for a new place, so she was jumping from Airbnbs to couches and even sleeping in her car when she didn't want to be a burden. She kept most of her belongings in her car, and rainwater had started leaking onto what little she did have after pawning her most valuables. She felt stuck and defeated. When she was at her wit's end, God came through with a miracle and a blessing for her. It wasn't anything permanent, but it was a place she could be at peace. It was a weekly rental studio, and she was able to move in the same day she went to view it. She finally had a place she could put all of her things, and finally could just relax and be in her own space again. It was everything she needed and then some, so she could finally get back to working on her seeds. She was even able to enjoy time and reconnect with the people who genuinely had her best interests at heart. Her day ones, the people who were actually proud of her growth and inspired, not intimidated by it. She was in a great place, and she knew she would thrive. She just had one huge obstacle that had hindered her more than anything else on this journey: procrastination. You see, the Empress struggled with procrastination a lot. She would lose focus often, and her thoughts would jump around a mile a minute. She would make lists in an attempt to stay on point with her goals, but she would often get sidetracked. She felt incapable of prioritizing her time properly. The Empress was diagnosed with ADHD. This was a life-changing discovery for her. Over the course of her journey, she had taken a long, hard look at her life. She had been cutting karmic cycles left and right, and this meant removing all toxicity, including the habits and traits within herself. This was one habit she couldn't shake, and she couldn't figure out why. She had been asking God to remove any procrastination or distractions that were keeping her from her goals. He showed her why she was having such a hard time changing it despite all her efforts. She could finally put a name to it, so she was able to understand herself better and started finding holistic methods to be able to manage it. She found out her lists were a great start, but she needed to break them down further and be more specific with each task. She started tracking how often she would lose focus and drift out, and started setting alarms to remind her to stay tuned in. She would also meditate more frequently throughout the day so she could keep her mind clear of any jumbled thoughts. The Empress was happy. She was so ecstatic because she knew all the old baggage was in the past where it belonged, and the road was clear for her to move towards her soul mission. She was paying close attention to her thoughts and feelings, searching for clues about her soul mission. She still hadn't identified what it is, and the only info her angels provided is that she should use her spiritual gifts to their highest capabilities. Besides her intuition, she hadn't figured out any of her other gifts. She just knew she was destined to help others. She considered humanitarian work, crystal healing, or even psychic readings, but she wasn't quite sure where to start. So she began learning a little bit about all three at the same time. Then she remembered something she bought a couple months earlier but had never even opened: a tarot deck. She had been listening to collective tarot readings and had bought a deck out of curiosity, unsure if she would ever be able to actually read them herself. But as soon as she took the cards out of the box and held them in her hands, she knew she was meant to do something with them. The feeling was indescribable. It was exactly what she felt the first time she held her clear quartz, but times 100. She quickly began researching her cards and spent some time writing down what each of them meant. She would then test her memory and her ability to tell the story of the cards. She learned the different spreads and would do readings for herself and her friends. After diligently working on the craft, she became quite satisfied with her progress. Her angels seemed pretty satisfied as well, as they began encouraging her to pursue a spiritually based career. This was backed in her readings, as any time she considered doing tarot professionally, a particular card would jump out: the Fool. It symbolizes taking a risk on the unknown. After all that she'd been through, the Empress should have known better than to doubt herself. Her intuition told her it was time, but she was scared and anxious about taking such a huge step. Her angels and readings reassured her that she had nothing to worry about and reminded her that they are always right by her side. She put her worries to the side and began preparing to record the first collective reading that she would make public. After cleansing her room and meditating, she started cleansing her deck by passing each card through the smoke one at a time. She jokingly thought, "If this is my mission, then give me a reading." As she continued to cleanse each card, she noticed that they told a very particular story. Her story. Her detailed journey of how she went from being a regular schmegular girl to standing in her divinity as Tarrachae, an empress. And with that, she knew for sure that everything she needed was right in front of her.